afternoon.
It's good to meet you again.
Good seeing you again. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for joining us. As the AI continue to scale rapidly, power demand from data center is just as rising quickly. Balancing innovation with the protecting everyday customers has become a critical issue. You recently spoke in Washington on this topic, and we'd like to take this opportunity to better understand your perspective.
The testimony to Congress was all about how do we protect the ratepayers or the consumers of the customers of the utilities. There's an explosion happening. I called it a digital revolution. This digital revolution is bringing in massive numbers of data centers, chip manufacturers, so lots of growth in the U.S. The concern is that all of that growth is going to generate a lot of need to build new electricity generation, lots of new transmission lines, things of that nature in a very short period of time. This particular type of growth has the ability to be here one day and then 5 years later it's gone. You've built this transmission and this generation that's supposed to last 40, 60, 80 years. The concern was if we put that in normal rate base where everybody shares in those costs, it's going to make the bills go up. It's going to make them go up very rapidly because of the sheer number of projects that need to be built. That's not good. Even worse is if those go away or it, for whatever reason, doesn't materialize. Those businesses come in, they think they're going to be doing business, and then they don't. Now the ratepayers are stuck with all of this infrastructure that isn't even being used. We had to find a way to make sure that we're protecting the ratepayers.
When did you first realize that AI and the data center power demand could impact everyday consumers? Was there a specific moment or case that triggers this concern?
Really that's kind of what I just was mentioning was I realized that when they come in and they need all of this energy generation, you're talking about one data center, for example. It's not just data centers. One data center can take an entire nuclear power plant's worth of electricity. If we're going to build these nuclear power plants, the tech industry is only wanting to commit for 5 years. That's a problem because these nuclear power plants are meant to run for 60, 80, or 100 years. You have to upgrade transmission power lines. That impacts everybody, right? That comes up, and there's power lines that go to it only. That data center needs to pay for that infrastructure because no one else is being affected by it.
Because they have to concern their own cost, and some regulation require them to pay additional fees. They might leave Arizona and stop doing business here, which could hurt our economy.
Well, this is not an Arizona problem. This is a nationwide problem.
Oh.
As a matter of fact, me and specifically Kevin and Commissioner Thompson, we've been going all over the country talking about how we do things. The growth pays for itself model should be done. New York, Washington, all of these are experiencing the same boom in industry right now. So it's not just an Arizona problem, which means if they're going to build somewhere, and if they're all doing the same thing, Arizona's back in play. And we also have other benefits in Arizona. First off, a really dry climate. That's great for building semiconductors, for running data centers. We have very stable utilities in Arizona. California has brownouts all over the place, right? They've had a lot of them. We don't have that in Arizona. It's because we've got these policies, these good, I'll say, that needs to pay for itself, that we need to make sure we have enough reserve margin, that stay on, the air conditioner stays on, the water stays running, and as a general rule, of course, things happen, but large, we have a very stable grid, and that's those companies like coming to Arizona.
Why didn't others notice this issue, but the Arizona Corporation Commission did and brought it up?
Do say things in the sense of they require the companies to have these energy service agreements, for example, right? And then they bring them to us for approval. The reason they don't openly talk about a lot of this is because, first off, they're usually under a non-disclosure agreement. So they can't talk about it. The companies don't typically want them to be telling, certain. So they tend to just be very quiet about it. But fundamentally, we talk to the utilities and we say growth needs to pay for itself. Bring us a special energy services agreement. Then they get the message, right? And they blew down in the Tucson area. That's been a big talk. A lot of people were upset because Tucson decided not to annex the land that encompassed and not provided any water. And when they voted that down, that means they basically gave up all the benefits that data center brought. But the data center turned around and said, we're going to build it anyway. We're going to not use as much water. We're going to use closed loop cooling. And so we're going to go ahead and build it. And then they went to TEP, Tucson Electric Power, and they put together an energy services agreement. And what the ESA did was you have the current tariff that they could have taken power, just like anybody else, right? Mm-hmm. They entered this energy services agreement to add protections so that if that doesn't materialize, the ratepayers for any of that infrastructure that had to be built for it, they're not going to pay for it. So they said, well, we're going to be here for 20 years. If we're not here, here's a letter of credit that you can cash in, right? And we'll pay for it anyway. They also said that they have about $20 million worth of transmission infrastructure. This particular project, they said, we're going to pay you $40 million for that. There's a number of reasons for that, but some of it is there could be cost overruns. Some of it is you don't really know the exact cost because a lot of that goes up to the federal level at FERC and then gets passed down, and you don't really know exactly how much it was. So they just said, we'll pay double, and anything that's left, we're going to lower. You put that towards lowering the rates for Tucson Electric customers. So these strategies are actually pretty good in the sense that the entire point is to protect ratepayers, and we're finding that this big industry, not only are they not being scared away from Arizona, but they're voluntarily paying so that they can get the power faster. And what that does is it helps put pressure downward on the rates of everybody else.
That's good.
Another story of Project Baccarat over there by Luke Air Force Base, just north of there.
Yes.
They came in and they said, in a nutshell, they said, we're going to give up all of our tax incentives. Because in Arizona, if a data center were to put power on the grid, then they don't get their tax incentives. It's just a weird law that we have that no other state has, but we have it. Said, we don't care. We're going to build our own generation, put it next to our data center. We're only going to use 500 megawatts, but we're going to build 700 megawatts. The other 200 can be used to stabilize the electric grid in the area, and they're paying for it.
That's good.
So these are the kind of things that they're willing to compromise, and they're even willing to help out the surrounding areas if we allow them to get on the grid faster.
So that means we don't have to worry about our electrical bill. They already get the solution.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's going to go down because that would be lying, right?
It's the key. Right?
But we're doing can to work with these companies to try to minimize the rate impact, right? Make sure they're paying for themselves. Make sure, ask them if they're willing to do a little bit extra to get online faster. Are they willing to, say, curb their usage during peak times, for example? All sorts of things we can do, and all of that is to help keep them from having to build additional infrastructure that is needed to make sure the grid stays reliable. The difference that you're seeing nowadays, we've got a lot of data centers in the Phoenix area, and they've all fallen under the normal traditional style. And that's because they come in and they ask for 30 megawatts. Okay. Well, now we're seeing these big projects, industrial data centers. They come in and they say, well, phase one of our project is going to be 300 megawatts. So it's an order of magnitude larger, which is why this is such a big deal. The funny thing about this entire discussion, especially when you talk about data centers, is people will complain about data centers on Facebook or on X.
Yes.
Using the programs run on data centers, right? So the irony, the same people that don't like the data centers are the ones that are fueling the demand for the data centers. So we want to work with these companies to do what we can to make sure that they are able to build what they need to build and make sure their companies are growing, make sure they're investing in Arizona. But at the same time, we want to make sure that those costs don't get put back onto the backs of residential and small commercial, because that can be crippling. So, and while we're doing all of this, we got to make sure it remains reliable, right? So it's a nice balancing game where we don't want to sit there and say this is going to be so strict that nobody wants to come here, but at the same time, it needs to be strict enough that we're protecting people.
So what's the situation right now? Is each company have the different contract?
So we just had what we called our large load workshop. It used to be a data center workshop or a data center docket. We changed it to be large load because it's not just data centers, right? Like I said, a great example of a huge load that. But we had the workshop for that docket, and one of the things that we walked away with was the companies as well as the general public wants assurances and stability, but there also needs to be a way to be flexible. So. And this is something that I talked about to Congress last week, and it's something that other states are paying attention to as well, that maybe having a large load tariff or an extra large load tariff, as the case may be, that defines the parameters, defines the rates that need to be paid, but then allowing these energy service agreements to stack on top of that to allow the flexibility, because each one of the data centers is slightly different, right? They bring different for the grid. They might bring battery storage, which can be used to balance the grid. They might have ramping profiles that are huge. They might be very flat. You never know. So each one is very different in nature. All of those are different from a TSMC or a steel recycling plant, right? The load profiles are way different. So if we allow these energy service agreements on top of the tariff, that gives them the stability and consistency of a tariff and the predictability. It also allows us to tailor an agreement to that specific customer. And that seems to be the way that almost everybody kind of agreed is the best way that provides the best balance. So that's kind of where we're headed, I think.
You seems like read my mind. You answered all questions I want to ask.
Good.
My goodness.
Been talking a lot about this. So.
Oh, okay. Is any solution yet right now?
Well, I think you're starting to see a lot of these companies are coming in and realizing that if you're going to build infrastructure, you're going to build corporations in the desert, you probably aren't going to be a water-intensive company.
So they need the application from the corporation to get the permission, or the...
Well, not necessarily. What they have to do is either one, bring their own water, first off, and that's usually going to be at an ADWR, Arizona Department of Water Resources, or it's going to be at the city or county level, and it's going to be working with the water utilities. But a lot of them are saying, well, maybe we need to do our own water filtering and our water treatment and everything so that they can be more closed loop. That's a good thing. And then you're seeing a lot of these large companies come in that need a ton of power. So they're starting to talk about bringing their own power. So you'll see, example, Amazon partnered with X-Energy. X-Energy is a small modular reactor, nuclear reactor. They're building one in Texas. They've got 4 more planned in Washington. But the whole point is they can build these reactors, put them next to their data centers, and they'll power themselves. You know, excess power that may be able to generate can then be used back on the grid for stabilizing force. The benefit doing something like that and having an energy services agreement is you're now going to be able to say that you can have an agreement between the utility and Amazon. As an example, right? I'm not saying this is happening, I'm just saying it's an example. But if they've got their own nuclear reactor next to their plant, they can maybe throttle down their electric usage, throttle up the nuclear power plant, and now all of a sudden we have a dispersed energy system that helps to stabilize areas of the grid that might have problems during the heat of the summer. So there's all sorts of ways that, and they can be compensated appropriately for having that ability, even though it may not be used all the time. So you see these special agreements, they're there to really to help everybody out. So that's where I see things are starting to go, is you're starting to see these companies that are coming in saying, okay, we get it, we need to work with the community, we need to maybe provide some stabilizing force, we need to provide extras for that community, whether it be transmission upgrades or whatever, and we're willing to do that as long as you can get us on the grid faster.
Finish the job, and they move. For example, if the company wants to move to another state, and how about the electrical? They take off too?
Yeah.
Or they keep for us?
Generally speaking, that's not going to happen. Once you build it, it's probably going to stay. What will more than likely happen is they'll give it to the utility, the local utility, or there's such a thing as an independent power producer, and they will partner with that independent power producer to keep that running, or they'll just sell it to the next person that comes in and buys that building, right? They're not going to pick the building up and plop it in another state. I mean, they take a really big crane.
How about, are they have any kind of pollution or something?
That's why a lot of these companies are starting to partner with small modular nuclear reactors, because there's no pollution, right? The nuclear reactors, they generate the heat that powers the turbines. Cooling is the thing, but a lot of those are even air cooled, so they don't even take water. So there's a lot of advantages to going that route. Now, some of them are putting in, like Project Bachar I was telling you about, they're using small natural gas generators. Yes, there are pollution, but as long as they're meeting the EPA requirements, and they can do that with various filters and everything on their units, then it's not a problem.
Who is going to check on those people doing?
There's a lot of organizations that have them under, Department of Environmental Quality. There's us, right? We check on them. There's the environmental quality cities themselves. All of these people have various checks and balances, and part of it is to make sure that all those checks are being done, before they connect on the grid and things of that nature. So,
well, thank you very much for your good opinion, and tell everybody about the AI data things. People just concerned, but they don't know what's going on, and the electrical bill high.
They don't get out there and tell people the benefits that they bring. People don't know that everything they do in their lives, from hospitals to schools to Facebook and Twitter to just about anything they do, is on a data center now.
Yes.
And so they're critically into everyday life, is what that means. Your Amazon Alexa, right, goes through a data center before it comes back and turns your light on when you tell it to. All of those things are critical for our everyday life now, and without them, we're going to suffer, right? Because people are used to it. So data centers have not done themselves any favors by staying silent. Now, I don't want to sit here and tell you that was the wrong thing to do, because by and large, data centers like to work in the shadows. They don't want people knowing where they are, what type of data center it is. Is it a warehouse or is it a data center? Because now they're targets, right? So I get that. But at the same time, when they're wanting to bring on massive buildings like this, and then they come in and they want non-disclosure agreements with the utilities, and the utilities can't talk about it. Now all of a sudden it's this big mystery that people get all bent out of shape for, right? And they get, because what's behind that non-disclosure agreement? Why are they not telling us things? So there needs to be a better balance there. And it's an important part of doing business. I'm not going to tell you they're not, but it can be done in a way that's maybe a little more transparent. So that's one of the things I would, I guess, caution the industry about is don't be so closed about what you're doing. Get out there and share it so that the good work that you're doing can be displayed, and that that can help Arizona's economy grow.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. You
My
gave me
pleasure.
so many answers. I didn't ask. The new things need thinking.
Anytime,
Really clean up,
anytime.
and thank you for your time.